Good evening and welcome to Crawley Borough Council's Overview and Scrutiny Commission meeting of the 23rd of June 2025. I'm Councillor Justin Russell, Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. As all members will have seen, we've got a very busy and full agenda tonight, and I just thought it'd be worth saying I would respectfully ask members to keep their questions and contributions as succinct and precise as possible. But that said, we will of course assure that full discussion is needed where it's needed is held. There are no scheduled fire drills tonight, so in the event of a fire alarm sounding, please leave the building via the main spiral staircase and through the main reception doors. Once outside, turn left and make your way to the fire assembly point located beyond the multi-storey car park on Exchange Road. If you're unable to use the stairs, please wait in the council chamber and you will be guided by a member of staff to the evacuation lift. This meeting is streamed via the council's YouTube channel, so please note there is a no comments function available as part of the webcasting. The council is the data controller and will retain the data collected during the webcast. This will be done so in accordance with the council's published data retention policy. We do have someone in the public area today, so any members of the public seated, members of the public and councillors seating in the public gallery should be aware that by entering the chamber, they are consenting for their image to be captured by the automated camera system. Recordings will be used for webcasting and or training purposes. Councillors are reminded to take note of what is displayed on their screens in the room, as this shows what is being recorded and recorded on the webcast. Cameras are currently set to capture you in your seated position, so please remain seated when speaking. You can request to speak as usual in the committee by raising your hand, to speak by pressing the button with a face, and the microphones will go green when you are live. We will now start the meeting with apologies for absence, and I think, Heather, you were going to mention about the room as well. Have you received any apologies for absence?
No apologies received, Chair, but as members will have noticed, we currently have quite a few fans operating in the room. If these get particularly loud, please feel free to either turn these down or turn them off. But obviously you will have noticed they are on for a particular reason tonight. The temperature is quite high in the room. Thank you.
Okay. Disclosures of interest and whipping declarations. Does any member have any disclosures of interest or whipping declarations?
Yes, Chair, I've got a... Yes. For the first, I think, item, having prejudicial interest, I've been a cabinet member for resources and having responsibility for complaints and performances during the period specified, and I will not be able to scrutinise the on area.
Right, thank you. So I understand that it will be necessary to step out for that part of the meeting. Are there any other declarations of interest? Councillor Crowe?
Thank you, Chairman. I have a personal, non-prejudicial interest in agenda item 8 as a member of West Sussex County Council, who is the local member for which this PSPO applies, but also as the cabinet member that covers community safety, and I was involved in the response that West Sussex County Council gave to this council.
Okay, thank you. Are there any others? Councillor Lunnan?
Thank you. Yeah, on item 7, I've got a personal interest in that I live in an area immediately adjacent to one of the recommended parking charges areas.
Thank you. And Councillor Ayling?
Yeah,
Do you want to do your microphone?
I've just had a message from Councillor Pritchard. He sends his apologies. He's stuck at work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So if we can add that to the apologies for absence. Any more disclosures of interest and whipping declarations? Oh.
Thank you, Chairman. My apologies for, I've just been reminded by another member's declaration that I should have declared this earlier as well. At the same time, I should declare an interest for agenda item 7, personal non-prejudicial, as a member of West Sussex County Council, again for covering the area where 2 of the schemes or potential parking charges affect, and also potential knock-on effects. So personal interest there.
No problem, thank you. Is that it? Okay, marvellous. On to the minutes. Now we come to the minutes of the last meeting held on the 2nd of June. Does the Commission agree with these minutes? Are they agreed? Agreed? Agreed, thank you. All right. Public question time. Nobody there. Okay, so we have no public in attendance, so we'll move on. Okay, we're now going to move on to consideration for report tonight's agenda, which is the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman's annual summary of complaints. I believe at this moment, Councillor Rana, where will you be?
I'll be just outside there.
Okay.
I'm just sitting somewhere, yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so back to the report, the annual summary of complaints and corporate complaints annual report from Siraj Chowdhury, Head of Governance, People and Performance, and Anna Pedlow from Corporate Performance Manager. Councillor Noyce is also in attendance as the Cabinet Member for Resources. The statutory overview and scrutiny guidance for local authorities published by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Government in May 2019 states that a scrutiny member should have access to a regularly available source of key information about the management of the authority, particularly on performance, management and risk. Therefore, the Constitution states that the role of the OSC is to monitor and review the internal and external delivery and performance of services, and we receive this report tonight. Can you please, or can I kindly present the report to the Commission? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. The Councillor's complaints policy that sets out how we respond to complaints in a timely and effective way. We also use data and learning from complaints to help drive service improvements. The principles, process and timescales within our policy are aligned in accordance with the Local Government and Social Care, LGSCO and Housing Ombudsman Complaint Handling Code, as the Council falls under the jurisdiction of both Ombudsman. The LGSCO Complaint Handling Code states that it's administrative practice that councils produce an annual complaints and performance report for scrutiny and challenge. The purpose of this report is to provide an overview of corporate complaints Crawley Borough Council has received from services that fall under the jurisdiction of the LGSCO in the period April 24 to March 25, highlighting key performance indicators, trends and lessons learnt. Crawley Homes produces a separate report on complaints that fall under the Housing Ombudsman. The report also includes details of the LGSCO Annual Complaints Statistics 2024-25, which is sent via letter and provides insight about our approach to complaints and details of decisions they have made about the Council. Whilst there is no legal obligation to carry out assessment against the Complaint Handling Code, we have completed this to demonstrate we are following the code. And the officers are here to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Are the officers going to make a brief presentation before we open it for discussion? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pull out a few key points, just in addition to what Councillor Noyce has just introduced. I just thought it would be helpful information for the Commission just to sort of remind in terms of the complaints process that we operate. We have a two-stage complaints process. Stage 1 complaints are undertaken by the relevant service manager. If the customer is not satisfied with the response, this may be escalated to Stage 2, in which case this is undertaken by the relevant head of service. On completion of our process, they may escalate their complaint to the Ombudsman. And part of the report obviously talks about the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman statistics for 24-25. Just to sort of mention about those aspects, so the Local Government Ombudsman investigated 2 complaints in the financial year. 1 complaint was upheld, that was a planning enforcement complaint. They found avoidable delay, which we did apologise for, but the delay did not affect the outcome of the planning enforcement investigation. A robust communication approach has been put in place while investigations are taking place, and the Ombudsman was satisfied with the actions taken, and we achieved 100% compliance with their recommendations. One of the key measures that the Local Government Ombudsman use within their report is the average number of complaints upheld per 100,000 residents. For Crawley, this was 0.8%. When we compare that with other similar authorities, the average was 1.1% upheld decisions per 100,000 residents. So therefore, despite 1 upheld outcome out of the 2 complaints investigated, we are still below the average of similar authorities. And just to point out, if there was anything that the Commission wanted to discuss in terms of the number of complaints received and timescales, obviously that's outlined in the report. But I think it's just worth pointing out in conclusion to the report that we do have a sort of a consistent approach to complaints, that the process is accessible and the public are able to make a complaint with ease. Complaints are regularly monitored within services, and obviously the corporate management team also oversee regular complaints information, as well as our portfolio holders as well, to ensure that we effectively manage and resolve complaints. So there aren't any other sort of major concerns to point out. It's just a sort of an information piece in terms of how we're doing in terms of complaints performance for those that fall under the local government ombudsman. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Do any councillors have any questions, please? Are there any questions from the floor? Councillor Lunnan.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the report. I mean, while I don't necessarily sound complacent, and no complaint is a good situation. I think overall our management of the complaints seems to be relatively healthy and open and transparent, and hopefully we can keep doing that. I did have just one question which I couldn't quite sort of work out from the report. The complaints that go to that the LGSCO deal with, do they also go through our complaints process first, or can a resident just go straight through to the LGSCO? And if they can go straight through to the LGSCO, there's no real answer. I guess the question is, what was our findings on the one that was upheld? If they have to go through us and then go through to the LGSCO, the one complaint that was upheld by the LGSCO, why did we not get that right in the first two opportunities, really? I guess the question.
Right, so ideally, we do encourage that customers go through both stages of the complaints process, and the Ombudsman is obviously the other.
Final. Yeah.
After the stage 2, but we do find that customers do go to the Ombudsman before they've completed, in which case the Ombudsman will contact us and saying, can you give us an update, have they been through your process, in which case we can say, well actually no, this is still at stage 1, or it hasn't reached our complaints process, in which case we would then log it and take it through our complaints process. Or if we've only had part of the process, then obviously it would go back, and then they'll class that as sort of an too early complaint. So ideally, the local government ombudsman is very much about giving the organisation an opportunity to investigate and respond before they will actually take on the case. And you know, there's got to be a good reason for them to actually sort of take it on and investigate.
So my question is, on the one that was upheld by the LGSCO, had that gone through our complaints process, our two-stage complaints process already, and had we evidently failed to deal with it satisfactorily to the level that the LGSCO felt was satisfactory, or had it bypassed our process, that specific complaint?
That would have gone through our complaints process, so that did go through both stages. I can't remember the actual outcome throughout our process off the top of my head, but obviously we did acknowledge that there was some delay on the one that was upheld, but reassuringly it didn't impact the overall enforcement investigation, so we were still following due process, but unfortunately we took time and didn't communicate that well with the customer, so that was the bit that was recognised as not being good practice. So obviously we apologise for that and explain that to the customer, and obviously we'll avoid that going forward, that we will obviously ensure we continue to communicate throughout the process.
Councillor Hellier.
Thank you, Chair. I did ask this previously, but I thought it'd be useful for the Commission to actually hear that. It was just in relation to the process that we have if a complaint relates to staff conduct, and do we have sort of any processes in place to actually address anything that might cause concern? Thank you.
Obviously, as part of the investigation, the manager would obviously look to see what the reasons were for the complaint. So obviously it'd be on a case-by-case basis. obviously, if it's something very serious, there are serious allegations that might warrant a sort of more of an investigation, and obviously that would be treated in line with our own HR procedures. So we have a policy in place that might warrant sort of an HR investigation. But on the whole, don't normally go down sort of a more formal route, but obviously there is policy in place if there is anything more serious. But sometimes we find it could be more sort of a misunderstanding, or the tone wasn't right, or the customer didn't feel they were being heard, or things like that. So it's more just sort of maybe some of the approach that we use, but nothing too serious. But obviously we do have a process in place.
Are there any other questions or comments from the floor? Okay, Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. Just adding on to what Councillor Haley has just said, on your chart you've got poor communication at 73%. That's quite a concern, seeing such a high percentage of complaints about poor communication. I think you just touched on it, that maybe it's the way they're being communicated to and stuff. Is there something specifically for that we can train our staff, or listen to records and find out why is that so high?
Sorry, it should be noted that isn't recorded as percentages. That's just the number of times that the poor communication. But what we do find is poor communication, delay and customer service tend to be the top 3 reasons for a complaint. And we do find that more with the services that sort of have the higher demand and contact with customers. So that sort of can affect service delivery. So obviously where we have examples of those in place, and obviously service areas are either trying to sort of get more capacity or sort of temporary staff to try and help manage caseloads so we can sort of improve delivery of service. But I think it just goes back down to, just allowing ourselves time to remember to communicate and speak to our customers, and sort of perhaps better at sort of telling them sort of realistic timescales on which we can sort of get back to them about things. But you can appreciate some service areas are experiencing a lot of high demand, and sometimes that kind of goes out the window a little bit. But yeah, I think it comes back down to we're aware of it and we do what we can just to sort of keep on it, really.
Okay, thank you. If there are no more questions or contributions, you've all committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so I'd like to say thank you to the officers for their report, but also for the very helpful discussions that we had last week on that. So thank you very much. The recommendation is that the Commission notes the report with the actions being acknowledged and documented by the officers. I ask that the Vice Chair second. Councillor Helly, please can you second?
Yes, I second that.
Okay, is that agreed? Agreed. The recommendations are agreed. And we both have a note to remember Councillor Rana. Okay, we'll move on to item 6, the tenant satisfaction measures report from Councillor Irvine, Cabinet Member for Housing, Amanda Kendall, Head of Crawley Homes, and Georgia Lee, Crawley Homes Policy and Engagement Manager. The report is also not going to Cabinet. However similar to the previous report, the Commission now receives the annual TSM report to the scrutinise internal and external delivery and in order to scrutinise internal and external delivery and performance of services. Scrutiny can therefore be used to review these functions and monitor council performance. It's important the Commission scrutinise the tenant satisfaction measure results. Councillor Irvine, please can you introduce the report, and thank you.
Wrong button. So I think, Chair, you almost have introduced the report, so I'll keep my words brief in line with your opening remarks. This was this is here as a result of recommendation from the Housing Association Scrutiny Panel. Every year we carry out this survey, and of course it's very important that we know or get an indication of what tenants are happy with, what they're not happy with, what needs to be improved, and so on and so forth. So I believe we've been circulating some additional information tonight. So as you say, we have Amanda Kendall, Head of Crawley Homes, and Georgia Lee, the Crawley Homes Policy Officer, to help out with any questions or observations. So with that, Chair, I'll throw it over to you.
Okay, Amanda or Georgia, do you have anything you wanted to add before we open it to the floor? That'd be great.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to point out, this is the second year that we've done this survey. It's a statutory survey. It's required under the consumer standards for the sector. It was based on a smaller survey this year. We did a census style the year before, much smaller survey this year, but still within the requirements of the methodology of the survey for the regulator. Just a couple of things to point out. You'll notice that RP2, which are the repairs timescales, are not yet available. The data is quite complex there, and we're still working on that. And we have identified an anomaly with RPO1, which is decency. Now, they're not perception. So the tenant satisfaction measures are based on two things. There's perception, so that's the tenant satisfaction measures survey that goes out to residents and their perception scores, and then there's a series of management measures as well. So RPO1 and RPO2 are management measures. Like I say, we've identified an anomaly with decency. Also, just to point out, BSO4, another management tenant satisfaction measure. Water safety, you'll note that is significantly down from the previous year, and the paper that I circulated explains that. We had been working off multiple spreadsheets and information had been missed. So at the time of reporting, we had believed it was 100%. And after some curiosity about the data, it actually came out much lower than that. Properties had been missed off. So at the time, and so this is based on an outturn at the end of March, the outturn was 51.4% of properties were compliant with Legionella risk assessment, and you've got an updated paper explaining that and what the current percentage is, because it has changed dramatically. So once we had understood what the issue was, we identified additional resource in addition to HSL, who are our normal Legionella contractor, and we have been working at pace to get back up to speed with compliance in this area. At the end of this month, we expect to be almost 95% compliant, and the number of properties that we have left are properties that we are struggling to get access into. So some of our communal loft spaces where we've got communal water tanks are accessed through tenanted properties, and we are struggling to get access in them, and that is the remainder of the properties that are not yet compliant. But we are working with that, and if necessary, we will work with our legal team to enforce access into those properties. Just generally on the tenant satisfaction measures, you'll notice that the scores are fairly similar in most cases to last year. In some areas, perception is slightly decreased. So, for example, we've got respectful, helpful engagement, and our contribution to neighbourhood management slightly down, which is, I think Georgia and I probably feel slightly unusual, because we are actually putting more resource and more effort into both of these areas. So slightly disappointing for us, but again, just remember this is perception. It's not necessarily about what we're actually doing on the ground, it's about perception, and the questions are prescribed. We cannot change the way the questions are asked either. But what we are going to do, for example, with respectful and helpful engagement, we are just going to explore that in this year's survey, because we have to do it every year, and we're just going to ask some more probing questions outside of the prescribed questions to see if we can get to the bottom of that. You'll also note with complaints, we've got a similar number of stage 1s, we've got more stage 2s coming through, but you'll note a vastly improved performance against stage 1 complaint handling this year. And you will have a report on our compliance against the Housing Ombudsman Code coming up, not today. We have more time to produce this to the Housing Ombudsman, and we're still working on that data. Nothing else to add. Happy to take questions. I don't know if Georgia's got anything else she wants to add.
Yep, just a couple of additions to what Amanda's described already. it's just fair to say that the complaints satisfaction has not really improved, despite the handling having improved. So did a little bit more research into the comments that came back and what things people are dissatisfied with and whether they had in fact made a complaint, because the question doesn't define what a complaint is. It's entirely up to the person answering it to define what they mean by having made a complaint. So there was 44 people who were very dissatisfied with complaint handling, who said they'd made a complaint and were very dissatisfied. Of those, 11 had made a complaint that's tracked through our system. So their expression of dissatisfaction wasn't via the complaints formal channel. So it's interesting to unpick the ways in which people have considered themselves to have made a complaint, and one of the main ways appears to be where people have reported things to the antisocial behaviour team. So the perception is they've made a complaint, but it's not a complaint that's tracked through our system in the same way. When they are broken down, those 11 complaints, the vast majority were either upheld or partially upheld. So it wasn't that they were dissatisfied with the outcome of the complaint. It wasn't that it wasn't upheld, but they were dissatisfied with either the process or the resolution, yeah, I think that was all I wanted to note, really. That the complaint satisfaction has got a little bit more context to it there.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for presenting the report. I'll open it up for questions and discussion. Do any councillors have any questions or issues that they would like to raise on the report? Councillor Lunnan.
Thank you. I mean, as the former chair of the scrutiny panel that asked us to come forward, I'm very grateful it has come forward, and thank you for bringing it forward and for the excellent report. I think, in particular, I really, really like the way you've broken down the results around benchmarking ourselves against other providers, especially getting all the way down to other local authorities that have roughly similar sized numbers of units. So thank you very much for doing that. And I guess what that data shows, my summary is, and feel free to disagree with me, is that we're mostly we're generally better than average, but we're not generally in the the best in class. So we're not Premier League, we're probably Championship level. We're better than the Crawley Town are doing, obviously, in football, but we're sort of Championship level of a housing association provision. And I guess my blunt question is, and you can answer this however you like, are you happy with that kind of positioning, and what do you think is the most important thing to do to try and raise us into the Premier League? And obviously we can get taken over by a very rich foreign owner, if you're using that football analogy going further, but assume we don't have a lot more money to give you, what might you be able to do? And again, you talked about complaints, and I understand why you've talked about complaints, because they are so much lower as a general score than all our other scores. But again, when you look at the context of the other providers, the complaints do come out quite low for everybody concerned. So I think partly people who have complained, it might be that they don't like a policy, for example, and there's, the complaint can be upheld as, yeah, we've answered your question. They're still not happy because they don't like our policy. But that's not the deliverance of Crawley Homes. That's just the fact that whatever the issue was, they're just not happy with that issue, and you can't really resolve that just through the complaints process. So I'm not particularly worried about the complaints process. My question is a broader one: are we happy with where we are, and what do we think we should be doing to try and get ourselves up to into the upper quartile, basically? Quite broad.
Well, I'll let I hope Amanda will be able to say what we can do. But I mean, I'll put it like this: I'm not unhappy with the results as they are, but I'll be even happier if they were better. And I hope that next year when we bring these figures, this report to you, there will be an improvement across the board, even though, as you said, Councillor Lunnan, there are mitigating factors as to why people may or may not be dissatisfied. So I'll leave the rest to Amanda, if that's okay.
Thank you. I mean, look, I think it's fair to note that satisfaction across kind of customer service sectors has gone down year on year. Georgia, there was a graph in here somewhere. It's on page 38, and it kind of shows the national context. in terms of satisfaction with services, and you can see that that's just gone down generally in kind of all areas. Now, it looks like from the pandemic onwards, it seems to have gone down. Now, perhaps, you know, there's something there about people just kind of expecting more maybe, or, you know, kind of different lifestyles now. But I think it's interesting to note that satisfaction has generally gone down. In terms of the local government sector, generally we're doing really well against all other local government landlords. It's when you put us in with RPs that we're not quite doing quite as well. But if you think about RPs, they just have a lot more money available to them than we do. But obviously that doesn't stop the fact that we do want to get better. I mentioned earlier about the kind of respectful and helpful engagement, and actually that being a slightly disappointing score for us because we are putting more money and resource into that and doing more than we ever have. But as I also said earlier, we're looking to put a supplementary question into our tenant satisfaction measure survey this year. Now, we have to ask the prescribed questions in a set way, and after we've asked them, we can put supplementary questions in. So we want to just explore this a little bit further and just understand this with residents. You know, kind of the same thing with kind of getting out and understanding the kind of approach to neighbourhood management. You know, we continue to do our estate inspections. We are about to have in August another kind of big estate inspection where we're out all day on one estate doing a big door knock, kind of understanding more and getting out into our communities. But I think just remember some of this is about kind of perception. But George's team, there was a growth item last year and George's team will be growing, so we'll be doing more work and getting more information out to residents, because some of this is about residents want to feel more informed, so we will be getting more information out. Her team is, like I say, growing, so we'll be doing more as well. We also have a consumer standards action plan, so this is us. We've undertaken a gap analysis between what we currently deliver and what the consumer standards require us to deliver. We've got a whole kind of series of actions kind of around that. We have a tenant member on that board as well, who is helping to kind of drive and monitor the improvements that we are indicating that we want to deliver against those standards. So once we're delivering them all, you would expect that people's perception will improve. But I think that table on page 38 shows that actually it's becoming even more challenging to get positive feedback. But I think the important thing to note as well is we do actually get a fair few compliments as well from our customers. You know, it isn't all complaints and doom and gloom. You know, we do get some really good feedback into the service as well. Georgia, you want to add anything?
Yes, just a couple of things. In the presentation report from Acuity, there's a key driver analysis, and I think something that's very clear across the board is that one of the key drivers of satisfaction is people's perception of whether they have a well-maintained home. Crawley Homes are doing an awful lot of work in terms of stock condition surveys, understanding our stock and working and responding to people's concerns about property maintenance. And many of the comments about repairs and dissatisfaction are about planned works. So when people are raising a repair now, they immediately, if it's around something that's normally a planned piece of work like windows, roofs, etc., they're immediately being offered a stock condition survey to sort of robustly look at the condition of their home. So I think the improvements that we're making in terms of stock condition surveys should make a difference. The other driver I think that's really important, which is further down the report, is the impact on overall satisfaction where people are experiencing struggles with cost of living. And with overall satisfaction, if people have declared that they're in the survey that they're struggling with the cost of living issues, their satisfaction overall is 70%, whereas if they don't disclose, that's actually 82%. So I think the national trend of dissatisfaction going down has got a lot to do with the struggles that people are experiencing with cost of living, and our teams are working really hard to identify people who are struggling in ways that we can help and support them.
Just one further thing to add as well, there's greater levels of dissatisfaction amongst younger people. We do want to unravel that further, and one of the things that TLAP, which is the overarching resident board, they want to recruit younger people onto the board and get them engaged, and the more younger people that we can engage, we can understand the dissatisfaction better as well. But it is on TLAP and those residents that engaged, it is perhaps kind of slightly older people, so we do need to engage younger people just to understand and kind of get to grips a little bit more with the dissatisfaction.
Just one last thing on that is we do have the opportunity to do that from the in both surveys. We've asked additional questions around other areas that we wanted to explore further, and we do have questions on engagement, whether people are interested in engagement opportunities, and taking their feedback further, and that those are broken down by demographic. So we can identify, for example, a number of people who are under 35 who are interested in taking part that we'll reach out to specifically for further feedback. In terms of age, it is closely related to tenure as well. The analysis of those who are dissatisfied by age tends to suggest that those are people who are living in flats, and there are issues around communal safety and well-being, which impacts their feelings of safety, which then impacts the overall satisfaction.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Irvine, I think you still got the mic's on.
Sorry.
I'm aware of 3 people that want to speak. Councillor Barrett, sorry. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. It was an excellent answer. And my only other question was around, and maybe I should have asked it earlier, how easy are these surveys to fill in if English isn't your first language?
So with this particular survey, more of the surveys were done by phone, and Acuity have got translation available, and they can identify where people have got translation needs. They use a blended method, so they send surveys out online, and they also send them out by post. But in this instance, a higher proportion were done by phone, so they've got the opportunity to do that. There's an FAQ that goes out as well, which gives people opportunities to communicate in other ways.
Okay, Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, thank you. I'd also like to echo my thanks for the report, and I'm pleased to see it coming to the committee on a regular basis. Outlines the overall satisfaction for women is significantly lower than men, 69 compared to 82%. You note in the report that it's difficult to say why that is, and have helpfully outlined to Councillor Lunn some of the initiatives to support people with different protected characteristics. So just wondered if there's any work being undertaken to specifically support female tenants through communications. Thank you.
Yeah, we haven't set, in terms of the demographic information in here, we haven't yet set the parameters about how we'll be going out to people, but it's, I think partially that's explained by the main tenant tending to be female, and the survey goes out to the main tenant, so it may be a question of numbers, but it could also very much be a question of greater dissatisfaction, and yes, we do need to unpack why that is.
Okay, Councillor Rana.
Thank you, Chair. Earlier on, Georgina mentioned that sometimes it's very difficult to get access to people's houses. And is it because residents don't open the door, they're in, or maybe they're out? And another thing, how do you let the residents know that you'll be coming around? Do you email them, or how do they know that the council officer, someone from the council, will be visiting them? Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Rana, is this when we have our estate days? Oh, do you want to? Sorry, are you talking about the water safety? Right, sorry, my misunderstanding. So how do they know we're coming round? So we would letter drop them, or we'd be writing to people trying to get access in, offering appointments. Most of our communal water tanks are accessed through communal space. It's just the ones that are in tenanted properties that are proving a problem. But we would follow a routine no access process, because if we follow that, then that enables us to robustly look to the enforcement. And without doing that, we wouldn't. But we have established processes across all of our compliance areas for gaining access. And that would be generally a 3-letter process. But we would also try calling. And there could be some ad hoc door knocking as well, but people would certainly be knowing that we're trying to get access.
Councillor Hellier.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I think it's very beneficial to us to actually see it broken down into such detail. I guess one of the things that comes home to me is there's an awful lot here where you talk about perception, and it is absolutely perception. So it's looking at where we can influence things. So some of the answers, I guess, are where even though, say, something takes a long time to actually go through the process, is to ensure that we have a process that can follow it through and also give the feedback to the residents so that their expectations, if you like, are met in terms of timescales, what's going to happen, and are we going to follow up. So if we've got a contractor involved in that, how do we ensure that it happens? Because I guess where we've got someone out there who's doing something on our behalf, we're probably likely to get a complaint if we don't follow it through robustly. Can you just chat a little bit around that, please?
So, I mean, obviously around kind of repairs priorities, for example, we are regularly at weekly learning boards, at core group, looking at all the priorities, for example, at them, sense checking the figures with them, with jobs that are taking a long time. So we have aged WIP that we look at with contractors. We look at why they're not moving forward. We do that fortnightly with them, and we look in detail at cases. For example, the other thing that we're doing, we have a scripting process now. When customers phone into our repairs contact centre, the call handlers have to ask certain questions about kind of vulnerability. Do we need to tailor a repair service? One of the actions in our Consumer Standards Action Plan is to look at the qualitative side of that and look at, is that happening? Are they doing that? Are we following that through to the on the delivery of that? Is that what the contractor's doing? Now that process hasn't actually started because we've been just trying to embed the new repairs priorities that came in January, and we've actually lost our repairs and operations manager as well, who retired. So we're slightly struggling with resource at the moment, but that is absolutely in our action plan, that we know we want to do that because we want to track things through. The other thing, we are conscious as well that a large element of complaints, for example, is where communication is going wrong, and also how it kind of moves across between the responsive and plan team. Now, Georgia spoke about stock condition earlier, and of course one of the things that we're trying to do is understand our stock better so we can preempt things more, rely less on responsive repairs and more on planned maintenance, and of course that will be communicating with the customer our end. Then when we're handing over and mobilising the planned programme every year, working with the contractor, looking at what's happening, having regular contract meetings with them, etc. So there are lots of touch points when we're working with the contractor. The other thing that TLAP are doing, so that's the overarching tenant group, is they are concerned about the communication journey that the customer has. And the one thing that they want to do is pick up a project and run with the project themselves, looking at all the communication touch points. So they'll be holding not only the contractor, but also us to account, making sure things are happening. So there are lots of opportunities for sense checking things.
Okay, Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the detailed report. Just two things. One, we talked about perception at the moment. A lot of the time when we want to improve perception, it is down to communication. And if there were like newsletters or information bulletins that could go out with figures like you're giving to the Scrutiny Committee now, to tell them this is what happened, this is what we've done, and these are the outcomes, that may assist in trying to get the numbers sort of a bit up with the perception side of it. Secondly, I was just looking at the approach to ASBs on your chart, and obviously that is quite concerning, the sort of figures we've got for that. What are we doing to sort of tackle that, and obviously the perceptions of ASB issues as well?
So just on, sorry Ian, do you want to come in?
Well, I just want to say thank you for your comments, and this will be public. This report will be published on the website, and there is a regular. I think it goes out by email. Kind of online newsletter that goes out from Crawley Homes every so often. As with the ASB, I'm not trying to pass the buck here, but it's not actually, although it's part of this of the Crawley Homes function, it's not actually part of my portfolio. In other words, I'm not briefed on it. So, although obviously I completely agree with what you have to say.
So just on the ASB side of things, you'll note that is tenant perception measure number 12. So our resident satisfaction is actually up on this year compared to the previous year, and it actually also sits above the regulator of social housing kind of benchmark, so we are doing slightly better generally. But actually this is a really difficult area to get perception right, because sometimes we cannot take cases forward for residents because there simply isn't enough evidence. Now that may be a reason for poor perception scores here, because although we have a robust ASB policy, and actually we get very, very few formal complaints for ASB, we get very few things that go forward to the Housing Ombudsman, and when they do go forward to the Housing Ombudsman, you know, we've had a couple of cases in recent times that we've got one currently going at the moment that has a couple of service failures with it, but actually we don't agree with the Housing Ombudsman finding, and we've challenged it. We had another case a couple of years ago that went to the Housing Ombudsman, and the Housing Ombudsman actually didn't find any service failures, but did indicate that we needed to work closer with the resident to perhaps understand kind of management move, etc. Other things that we're doing with ASB, we do work very closely with the police. We've got ASB week coming up where we'll be out and about having a public face for ASB service into our communities. Just on the comms side of things, because that was your first question, wasn't it? We are doing more around that. Now, obviously, we had a recent regulatory inspection, and one of the things that we were conscious in the run-up to that when we were doing our gap analysis is that we do need more performance information more readily available more often for our tenants, because although we have an annual report and we would publicise it then, we are very conscious that we need to do that much more regularly. Now, in some blocks, we've got a series of notice boards that have gone up where we'll have some performance information. We had a growth item last year to do more comms with residents. Now, we're recruiting into George's team now, and once we've got those people in post, there'll be much more opportunity for doing that because we'll have a lot more resource. George, I don't know if you want to come in on that and just talk a little bit about the communication side of things.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief, but just to say that we have a communications plan that includes 3 or 4 newsletters a year. So there'll be at least each 4 months, and they will include the performance information. So all of the tenant satisfaction measures results will be in the newsletter that's coming out in July. And there will be a feedback slip there for people to feedback what actions they would want us to take in response to the information. And we'll also be writing to everybody who answered this survey this time as well to explain the feedback to them, ask if they want to get in touch and explore anything a bit further. So there's going to be a lot more opportunity for print information for people, and we've got a tenant newsletter editorial group who are giving their views about what should be in the newsletters as they go forward. So we will see a significantly increased communication directly to residents.
And just to add, we also have more information also on our website than we did previously. We've got a specific tile on our website now where we have performance information as well. And the whole idea is that residents are just getting more and more information from us to hold us more to account, because that's very much the themes that are coming up through kind of inspection and the consumer standards.
Okay, thank you. I don't think there's any more that people have indicated they want to speak. So I'd say that all committee members have had the opportunity to speak, but can I say thank you for the report, thank you for your excellent answers and comments tonight, and the pre-meet as well. So thank you very much. I move that the Commission is requested to receive the report, consider progress to date and acknowledge any future service actions, and ask that the Vice Chair second. Councillor Hellier, can you please second?
Yes, I second that.
The recommendations, are they agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 7. I'll just give a moment for people to change seats. Okay, thank you. We will now consider the off-street parking places consultation report from Councillor Jones, Leader of the Council, Georgina Buitt, Head of Community Services, and Dan Carberry, Public Protection and Enforcement Manager. Councillor Jones, can you please make a first introduction to the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here addressing the Commission rather than the Cabinet member due to a long-standing commitment that Councillor Hilton had made some time before knowing he was being appointed as a Cabinet member. And may I take this opportunity, incidentally, to wish him, through you, a very happy 60th birthday today in his absence.
Very much so, yes.
Absolutely.
Happy birthday, Nick.
Absolutely. You'd never tell, would you? The consultation period has finished, and the answers have been considered, and as a result, the decision has changed substantially from the original proposals. I think we can all see that, Chair. We can say as a council quite genuinely that we listened and acted responsively to what we were told. I'm therefore pleased to present the Cabinet report on off-street parking, which outlines our next steps in delivering a fair, sustainable and responsible parking strategy for Crawley. Now, as you'll recall, full council resolved to increase paid parking through off-street parking tariffs. Now, this excludes any income from penalty charges and is focused purely on how we manage and optimise our parking assets. Following that, Cabinet approved a site-by-site analysis in April, and we've since carried out public consultation and detailed operational reviews. Today, I will outline the recommendations we're bringing forward. Chair, it is not a surprise that telling people they may have to pay for their parking is not going to be terribly popular. We know that. But we have an issue where too much of the parking concern today was not being used for the purposes for which it was provided by the council, and enforcing controls requires funding to cover those costs. Just to demonstrate, however, how the proposals have changed, Goffs Park will now be charged at the same price as Tilgate Park, which is consistent and also lower than what was originally suggested. Also, hours of charging will end at 6 p.m, which will continue to deter commuters, which is what we said this was aiming to do, but allow park users and families to use the park later in the summer evenings without charge. This is a balanced approach that improves access for genuine park users by tackling commuter parking while helping us meet our financial goals to protect wider council services, which should also help us to invest more in Goffs Park going forward. With regards to the Hall Theatre, valid points were raised about the risk of delays caused by payment processes, especially for performances with strict entry times. There's also a concern that charges could deter attendance, which would impact both the theatre's viability and our cultural offer. Given these sensitivities, Chair, we're recommending that no decision is made at this stage. Instead, we'll continue working closely with the operator to explore a solution that protects the theatre's operations while addressing parking needs. The major alteration is to the proposals around K2 Crawley. We always knew whatever would be required at K2 would be complex. The consultation on how this is done was purely exploratory and no formal charging proposal was made. However, the feedback was clear. The public reaction to charging at K2 was unfavourable. Undoubtedly, this was not assisted by a notice that went up on the council's website, entirely in error, which certainly no one in the Cabinet had seen, including myself. It was therefore a mildly surreal experience to be told by so many apparent experts on social media with such confidence that this showed I'd already made my mind up. In fact, it was quite the reverse. I'm mentioning it now to acknowledge what happened, and so no one can accuse me or the council of trying to pretend it didn't. The council as an organisation will take lessons from this experience to prevent it reoccurring. Given the complexity on K2, we're not proposing charges. I can confirm that the recommendations going to Cabinet on Wednesday night will be not to proceed with charging at K2. Full stop. I can't be clearer. There is definitely something that will be needed done to introduce parking controls and enforcement at K2, even with us not charging for it, however. The car park at K2 regularly experiences congestion, safety issues, and pressure on capacity, especially during events, and I have been clear that we have a statutory duty to do something to address safety concerns at this site. Instead, we'll work collaboratively with the operator and other stakeholders to explore non-charging controls, such as improved layout, signage, and drop-off zones to manage congestion and ultimately to improve safety and ensure that paying members can access this site. The proposals for Orchard Street, Chair, have proved popular, with the majority of respondents supporting these proposals. We will be renaming the multi-storey as the High Street multi-storey to reflect its proximity to this part of the town centre. We will be implementing the low rate of parking all day for £3, and the additional income derived will help us avoid introducing charges at more sensitive sites like K2 and the Horth. The Council will also introduce an annual and periodic pass for residents 24/7 and a slightly cheaper one for town centre workers which can't be used overnight. At Kingsgate, the charging changes to design it as more of a short stay car park, as it was always intended to be up to 4 hours to facilitate shoppers. People can still stay all day, but the High Street car park will be more reasonably priced in those circumstances. Kingsgate is a key short stay site, and this structure is designed to improve turnover and support town centre footfall. In closing, these proposals reflect a careful balance between financial sustainability, operational feasibility and community needs. People have genuinely been listened to, and although not everyone will be happy, the input from the consultation has made a difference to the final results. We're asking Overview and Scrutiny to consider the report and provide any comments, and we're recommending that Cabinet approve the proposals as outlined. Thank you, and I welcome any questions, and if I can't answer them, I'm sure there'll be others present who will assist. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. Before I open it to the floor, I would say to the Commission that we had a very, very useful pre-meeting discussion, didn't we? I would ask the officers if there's anything they'd like to briefly add before we open it up, because some of the things that we captured in those discussions might be useful to share.
Thank you, Chair. I think I think Councillor Jones has talked quite clearly on that we have listened to this consultation, particularly around K2. As Councillor Jones said, it's an exceptionally complex site. And we do have a legal duty to manage that site, but the public consultation, it provided a strong sense from the community that whilst they understood and appreciated that we did need to do something, there was significant concern about how it would impact on use. And I think what's really important to bring members back to is the off-street parking strategy that we agreed, and that it's parking is not just about parking spaces, it's about how parking supports the wider offer. And we know that for our leisure and sports facilities and our cultural offer, parking plays a really important part in how people access those spaces. Just to add that, Councillor, if that was helpful.
Sorry, can you come again? Okay. Right. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Thank you for the report. I will now open to any questions and discussions. Any councillors have any questions or issues to raise? Councillor Rana? Any others? Yes. Okay. Sorry, I didn't see.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say, because I live near West Green, and for the last number of years, quite a few years actually, that car park's been completely full. And any time of the day you go there, it's completely full. Not even one spare parking space. So it's good though that, there's a charge, and £3, I think that's very good though, £3 for 4 hours, and for all day you pay £9. But I'm just wondering maybe if the people genuine, because there used to be just commuters parking there, and people, maybe lots of people usually live nearby and they walk. I hope, it doesn't really put them off parking there, But otherwise, it will be a good idea, though, not to let all the commuters park there. And from when will it be enforced, this payment plan? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think what's really, really important to remember is that what we're also recommending is the changes to how Orchard Street multi-storey operates. So we know that we're a commuter town. We have really exceptional links into London, down to Brighton. So part of this plan is about providing high quality commuter parking at High Street multi-storey car park. And there will be a huge amount of publication around those plans should Cabinet recommend it, and the timelines for those are slightly different. So the legal process for High Street multi-storey car park and Kingsgate, should they be approved, happens a lot sooner. So that will happen in around 4 to 5 weeks. Depending on the timetable for the Crawley Observer and getting the notice out there. So that's what we call a notice of variation to the order. So that's the really simple and easy part of the process. The second part, which adds in Goffs Park into Schedule 2 of the order, is done by a notice of variation. And that's a slightly more complex process. Members here will make the decision. That decision is then ratified by the Highways Authority, so West Sussex in this instance, and then it's the procurement of the parking machines and the civil engineering that will need to take place. So for that reason, I would say that the timeline for Goffs Park is probably around October and November.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, just another quick question. Oh, okay, so the multi-storey car park at Orchard Street, so that's intended for the commuters to come and park, and that's why it's such a low charge. Oh, I think that's really good, though. £3 all day, that's brilliant, though. I hope lots of people take an offer of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just add that it won't just be the commuters, Councillor Rana, it will be shoppers, people who want to come in and enjoy the nighttime economy. There'll be plenty of opportunities to use that car park at what will be a very attractive price, and we think that will also increase utilisation, which is very welcome.
Okay, super. Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Chairman. The council is in somewhat of a bind because, and the leader referenced the budget. Of course, at the budget, it was passed that the council would gain an additional £388,000 of income from parking strategy. But of course, we were not told at the time how that income would be realised, and that was one reason why I did not support the budget at the time. Just make a few general comments, and then I'll talk about the individual parts of it. The leader also referenced the consultation launch, and I'm glad he recognised the rather unfortunate error that was made with the document that was put on the council's Facebook page. It was a bit like dropping a hand grenade in a hornet's nest that got stirred up by that. Although it was perhaps a little bit unfortunate at the beginning of his presentation, he did say the decision, although he did later say the recommendations. I'm sure that was a slip of the tongue. But I do welcome that. Well, firstly, I welcome that actually a lot of people took part in the consultation. That is healthy, and I welcome that there has been movement in the recommendations as a result of that consultation. But there is a broader point that whenever changes are proposed to parking, whether it's introducing controls where controls did not previously exist, or introducing charging where charging did not previously exist, that there are implications often unforeseen, and it only becomes apparent further down the line that happens. Now, turning to the individual components, so look at the Goffs Park lower car park. Now, firstly, the strategy is about raising income. Let's not kid ourselves, but there are parts of it that are seeking to address problems that exist as well. So we all know there has been a problem with people parking at Goffs Park who are not using Goffs Park, whether they're commuters or shoppers or whatever. A free car park has meant that at times spaces have not been available for people who want to use the park, and so that is an issue. So I welcome the fact that something is being done, but whether charging is the right answer, it could be, for example, different controls could have been, time time limit controls such as 3 or 4 hours during the day could potentially stop commuters from parking there. But the parking charges that we have for Goffs Park, well, they're modelled on Tilgate Park. But what we haven't been told is that within the last year, the parking charges at Tilgate Park have gone up by 25%. So before November last year, it was £1.20 an hour to park at Tilgate Park. And then in November, it went up to £1.40. And now, as of April, it's gone up to £1.50. So that is a 25% increase within 1 year at Tilgate Park. So these new inflated charges will be applying at Goffs Park. And paragraph 5.111 on page 69 says, it's anticipated the introduction of parking controls may encourage a shift towards more sustainable or active modes of travel for part of the journey, contributing to improved air quality and reduced congestion. Now, I would say that's very nice, but unfortunately probably wishful thinking. And that has been used before, and I'll come to that when I come to K2. Now moving on to the Wharf, there haven't been any particular parking difficulties at the Wharf, and it works well where people go and go and with the theatre or see a show or doing something there during the day. And I'm pleased that the council has engaged with the operator, because the operator has given some really good feedback back to the council. But I do think the principle of charging to pay to park at the Wharf when you're going to an event does detract from the experience of having a night out. Whenever anybody goes to a new car park, you always have to read loads of instructions on the signs. It can be complicated about paying, and it is quite stressful for people. And the point is very well made by the operator that some people could be delayed and indeed not be admitted for a show. That's the last thing that anybody would want to see. And of course, being a Furness Green councillor, I am concerned about the potential for displacement parking, particularly in the bays at the bottom from numbers 2 to 6 Wheel Drive that's just across the road from the Wharf. Something would have to be introduced there to, as a result of charging at the Wharf, just to stop people just filling up those spaces and annoying those residents of those properties. So I welcome the change to the Wharf, but I do want to suggest in the recommendations that we a slight change. So on page 67 for F, where it says agreed not to implement charges at the Wharf at this time, but for officers to work with the operator of the Wharf in response to the public consultation and give further consideration to the implementation of parking charges in the future. I'd like the Commission to ask Cabinet if we could just insert 2 words after implementation, and that being and implications, so that when this is looked at again, it is looked at in the whole, not only for what implementation would look like, but also what the implications could be for the Wharf, for users, and indeed for the nearby area. So I'll make that as a formal move, Chairman, if the Commission could potentially ask Cabinet to add those 2 words to that recommendation. Now, coming to K2. Now, this is a mixed picture. There is a lot going on at K2, and when I say a lot going on, I don't just mean the different types of events and facilities, but also why people are parking and the issues around parking and the problems that there have been, such as, for example, sometimes the buses can't get through because of the way some people have parked. I also know that some people park there who walk to Tilgate Park because the parking charges have gone up so much in Tilgate Park, and also people could park there and be going somewhere else. There are issues there. Big events can cause congestion, and so I welcome the recommendation here that it does need looking at. And had we introduced charging, it would have been so complicated around all the different types of exemptions that we'd be wanting to look to do, that it would create a whole industry within itself and therefore extra cost to the council. Now I am, and I won't be much longer, Chairman, I am one of 3 members of the council who was actually out on the council when K2 opened 20 years ago. Indeed, our name, myself, Councillor Burgess and Lands, our names on the plaque there. And at the time, and I believe John Prescott, the late John Prescott, was head of the Transport Department, the Deputy Prime Minister. The council could not create as many parking spaces when K2 was being built as we would have liked, because of what I referenced earlier about the idea of having it more sustainable transport. And then subsequently, some years later, more parking spaces were put in, but we know it's still not enough at times, unfortunately. So I think there will be a lot of work to do there, but we could potentially seek to address some of the worst problems. So I do welcome the changes that are proposed there. I've said quite enough, Chairman, so I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We've got a couple of points there. Before we move to the wording, the possible change of wording, are there any responses that we want on that first? Sorry, on the general comments, is that okay?
Yes, Chair. Thank you. Councillor Crowe mentioned the budget. Now, we're confident if these measures agreed that the council will not be in deficit in terms of the budget. I would say that it's blatantly obvious that Goffs Park has been abused by commuters for quite some time now. And it has deprived genuine park users of the opportunity to park on numerous occasions. What we've tried to do here is we've tried to strike the right balance. Councillor Crowe also refers to a 25% increase at Tilgate Park. I understand that was a 10p increase. A lot of the reason for that, Chair, it has to be in sort of fairly, what's the right word? It has to be in fairly precise, exact numbers. Is that we still accept coinage at Tilgate Park, and you can't change the machine to accept sort of 2 3/4 pence or anything like that. So that's one of the explanations for that. As far as the theatre is concerned, the Horth at the moment is the only one that I'm aware of that you can visit and park for free anywhere. No doubt someone will write in and tell me of a theatre where you can do that, but I can't think of any in Surrey or Sussex immediately. Certainly when I've been to the Mayflower, for example, in Southampton, that's also one you don't get your parking for free either. I think displacement seems very unlikely to me at the Horth, as the proposed charge was relatively modest, and it's at the moment it's academic because it isn't going ahead. Now, if you think that the average cost of a ticket at the Horth last time I looked was approximately £50, if people are going to quibble about £1.50, this seems unlikely to me. But we'll look at other ways that we can address what's happening at the Horth. I don't think it's quite accurate to say there are no issues whatsoever at the Horth. I think one of the reasons it came to our attention to begin with was that there have been some non-theatre uses, I think is the only way I can describe it. And I think thank you for recognising as well that the K2 spaces are at a premium at the busiest times. But I think we need to recognise, anyone who's been to the car park at K2, is it's pretty vast. I mean, it's not like when you looked at it, you would look at it and think there isn't enough car parking. I mean, the only problem is that while we can be creative sometimes and we can use overflow car parking at Thomas Bennett or Desmond Anderson as it was when that's not needed, obviously that's not available all the time, and other more fundamental solutions such as building a multi-storey, as Councillor Mullins tells me, would have been the answer. It's simply not feasible at the moment. The council doesn't have the capital to do that. I do think that we've listened on K2, as I said, and but we can't ignore the fact that, for example, there are times that the Metrobus has to suspend the service to the leisure centre because it can't get in and it can't get round, and that's because of the dangerous and the irresponsible parking that happens. Because there's something rather alarming that happens in some motorists when they can't park. They sort of there's almost some kind of anything goes standards that become applied, and this has happened a lot in K2. And one of the reasons we looked very carefully at this to begin with was it came to our attention that there was some entirely unacceptable parking going on that needed to be addressed, and we can't ignore it anymore.
Were there any supplementaries? And before you do, with regard to the possible change in wording, we'll take that to the group once everybody's spoken. Yep.
Just a couple of comments, Chair. Just reference to thank the leader for his answer. Just to point out that my understanding is that the parking charges went up at Tilgate Park on the 1st of November from £1.20 to £1.40 and then went up again on the 1st of April from £1.40 to £1.50. While I accept that £1.50 had the charge come in for the Wharf, I think we all know that once the concept of charging comes in, that the amount that is charged only ever goes one way, and that way is up. I don't think for a moment that the charge would stay at £1.50 forevermore at the Wharf. I think we all know that. And while I accept that, I don't think that half a furnace green would suddenly get covered in cars because of a £1.50 charge. I do think the particular bays just right across the road at the start of Wheel Drive would be at particular risk for just need 2 or 3 cars to fill those bays. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I've got 2 more that have indicated they want to speak. Councillor Lunnon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report and coming to present it, Councillor Jones. I've got quite a few number of questions which you might be able to answer, but I don't know if you will. I'll start with probably my biggest one, and it's not your report, I understand it's Councillor Hilton's, but the whole reason that we went down this possible consideration of parking was, as you've highlighted, for the cost and the fact that we need to raise some money. You know, if our finances weren't so challenged, we wouldn't be probably doing this, is my understanding. So what I'm disappointed in is the report doesn't actually, it notes what the anticipated income should have been with the charges as we'd initially laid them out, but it doesn't detail what the anticipated income is with the revised charges at all, which I'm very surprised at, because it means we're now being asked to make a decision without having an actual understanding of what the financial impact of it is. Now, you've alluded to the fact that we won't be in deficit, but that doesn't give us particular reassurance that it's a sensible financial decision that we're being asked to be made. So I'm very surprised that isn't in the report, considering that fundamentally this whole issue is down to the fact that we are short of money as a council. We need to raise more money. So I'll let you get to that. And then also on to the point that you raised earlier, I just want to reiterate it about how the false parking order ended up on a previously unused consultation site. And I still don't understand how that happened. I'd wonder if you could go into a bit more details. It did undermine trust in the consultation, and it also undermined trust in the council. So while it was a human error, it still seems to me a fantastical error for somebody to accidentally make, and I still can't quite believe it was done. So I'd wonder if a bit more detail provided on that. Going through 3 different points, and one of them has already been alluded to, although I disagree with the direction it's come up from. It talks about the report talks about the active travel hopefully being increased use at Goss Park. My point on that is that there's currently no bicycle parking provision in the entirety of the park, so I'm not entirely sure how people will get there and store their bikes securely if we do want them to travel actively to that park. So could we maybe actually get a hard commitment on spending some money and getting some suitable bike parking there for people to actually supposedly actively travel to it? I mean, I'm not necessarily sure it will happen, but it definitely won't happen if there's no of anybody to store their bikes. With regards to the Wharf, I'm actually slightly surprised that we have delayed our decision. I think the outcomes of the report are exactly, we were basically going, look, we're going to charge you for parking. Do you have any issues with that? And people went, yes, we don't want to pay more money. And so we've gone, oh, we thought you'd be happy to pay more money, which obviously nobody's ever happy to pay more money. And frankly, as you said, the cost of the parking was relatively small compared to the amount to spend at the facility generally. And it was a relatively containable site. And so I think we probably could have pressed on with that one, in my mind. And at the moment, we're delaying the decision. I don't know for how long we're delaying it. And again, I can't tell if it's a sensible decision because I don't know how much money we're not receiving by not going ahead with this decision. So I can't really tell whether it is sensible for us to delay it or not. And then finally on to K2, I think K2 makes a bit more sense that we do not go ahead with it. People, pay small fees to go and use K2, and we do want people to use K2 for their health and their well-being. It's something that we're challenged with as a town as a whole to try and get more people partaking in healthy and active behaviour. I can't see how it would have been managed satisfactorily with the car parking we've got. That said, I don't know what we are going to do, as I think only a couple of days ago there were 3 buses stuck inside the car park there with nobody able to get out because of the car parking in that situation. So something is going to happen at K2, but I don't think parking charges were going to work at that facility. In addition, you know, one of the big drivers of usage at K2 is the gym, which brings in a lot of financial revenue into the council. Most people, when they go to the gym, have an expectation of free parking and would factor that into their application and choice of gym. I don't know any other gyms that don't provide free parking. In effect, indeed, we provide the parking for one of the gyms in the town centre. So I don't think paying extra for parking is ever going to really work at K2 in the short term or in the medium term. So I don't really know what the solution is there, but I do respect the fact that a lot of people were particularly outraged about the parking charges at K2, so I don't necessarily expect any changes there. That's it from me.
Okay, before I hand over, and I think I've picked out 5 questions or points there, could I put the second one over here on the issue of the false parking order that went up?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Lunnan. Yes, it was just, I'll let colleagues answer the questions on the various aspects of the parking charges, but on the issue about the documents that were published as when we did the consultation, the error there, you wanted more information. I mean, it simply was a human error. There was a misunderstanding about the sort of documents that needed to be uploaded, and there was a miscommunication when documents were sent from one team to another and the wrong documents were uploaded. As soon as we were aware of it, we took them down. We took them off the website. We issued a statement accepting that we'd made an error, and we republished. We started the consultation again with the right documents as soon as we could, and we started the clock again on that, so nobody lost any time. We also ensured that any responses that we received when the first documents went up were still included in the consultation. So the key thing, I think, for us is that members of the public still got an opportunity fully to respond. But it simply was human error. The officers involved have been spoken to through sort of normal management processes, and we will try and make sure things like that don't happen again. But it was a big piece of work, and it was a really unfortunate error. I think, as the leader said, hopefully what this does in terms of reassuring the public is the final orders that are going to be published won't look like the one that was published in error. And I think that hopefully shows that what was published in error was never our intention, and actually what we're publishing now, what we will be publishing coming out of this, is our intention. That will be what the council wants to take forward. So it was human error, and we're very, very sorry as officers. None of us wanted it to happen, but it was a mistake, and we've put it right.
Simple one. Why was there a draft version of a not required parking order?
So some of the work we have to do, we have to get outsourced. So they have to be drafted outside of the council. So we have a number of documents like that have got a sort of template on them. I mean, the document that went online had dates in that suggested decisions were made before we even started the consultations. They weren't right in any way, but the sort of structure of what the document looks like had been drafted. So we have got those, and it's probably fairly common across the council. You have draft documents available so that when a decision is made, you've got something to start from, and that's what it was.
Is that okay? Yep. Okay. On the other issues that were raised, over to Councillor Jones and the officers.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I'll let the officers answer the majority of the points, but just on the point regarding the horse that Councillor Lunnan raised, I think there's an old expression, sort of, "sin in haste, repent at leisure," which I think is appropriate here. We have throughout all this tried to work in partnership with our operators and trying to get this right in a way that everyone can be happy with. Now, I recognise, and I think fellow cabinet members recognise as well, that we've just extended our contract at the Horth with our operators, and there was a good amount of, or there was a fair amount of goodwill on both sides to achieve that. And so, if there is another way we can achieve the results we need, we're looking at, and I've asked the officers to do that. I think it's worth doing that. I think in terms of the money that we would get from the Horth. It's not riches beyond the dreams of Croesus, we'd be looking at income in the tens of thousands rather than anything sort of particularly extensive. But I think Dan's going to go through some of those figures that Councillor Lunnon was asking for. But I think the short answer is we're still confident, because although we're not going forward with a couple of the major proposals, that has been compensated in part by the strategic thinking we've done with the multi-stories.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. On the Horth, as Councillor Jones said, it was minimal income. So even on a 50% profit share with the operator, it was projected that the income for that site could be £28,000 per annum. On K2 Crawley, it's more difficult to provide you a kind of a financial figure on it, because we never really made any proposals. But if we were looking at charging non-members and only casual users, and again based on a profit share arrangement, that could have been an agreement for up to £200,000 per annum. Goffs Park, the reduction in the chargeable hours and the revisions to the tariff reduced the income projections from £55,000 per annum to 43,500, a reduction in 11,500. However, the revisions to the tariffs both at Orchard Street multi-storey car park and Kingsgate multi-storey car park could generate an additional income of £360,000, and Goffs with the 43,500 culminating in a projected annual revenue income of 453,500 for off-street parking places income. However, there is an awful lot of hidden costs in that income. So you have increased enforcement officer resources, increased notice processing officer resource, and you also have the kind of the overheads of managing a car park. The impact for the multi-storey car parks is minimal because we already have existing resource. So it's just kind of minor amendments to how we manage those resources. But certainly Goffs Park with potentially costs of around £25,000 per year in terms of management of the car park.
Yeah, that all sounds very reasonable. I mean, all I'd ask is any future reports that are primarily driven through finance include the full breakdown of the financing in the report so we can make sensible financial decisions on it. I think I've still had an outstanding question on the cycling provision at Goffs Park.
You do indeed. Could we just make sure that's captured, what Councillor London said about changes, so that can be taken to Cabinet? And comment on Goffs Park and cycling facilities. I don't know if anyone wants to respond on that.
Yeah, so I'll clarify that. When we're talking about active travel, we're not talking about Goffs Park. We are talking about, so it's in relation to Goffs Park, but I'll clarify. We have commuters that are walking some considerable distance from Goffs Park to nearby train stations. What we're talking about is when we're amending the kind of commuter offer that the council provides, again, at Orchard Street multi-storey. When we're talking about promotion of active travel, we're talking about getting their walking from Orchard Street multi-storey to the train station, not from Goffs Park. There's no current plans to introduce cycle storage at Goffs Park.
So, sorry, just specifically, it is mentioned in section 5.1.11, which is under the headline Goffs Park Lower Car Park.
Yeah, sorry, and that's lack of clarity in the report, Councillor. So yes, it's under the Goffs Park, but it is the work at Goffs Park and Orchard Street are happening kind of simultaneously. They're very interlinked. So by introducing long stay commuter parking at Orchard Street, we are providing a suitable alternative for commuters that are currently blocking the space at Goffs Park.
I mean, one of the other concerns about Goffs Park was that it would prevent people from attending Goffs Park because they wouldn't want to pay for the charges. One way around those charges would be for them to cycle to Goffs Park, But to enable them to do that, I go back to my previous point, they need somewhere to park their bike. And it's a fairly substantial park within the town that currently has no cycle parking. So while it might not have been the intention of the report, as far as I'm concerned, my thrust still stands. There should be cycle parking at Goffs Park.
We can absolutely consider that, Councillor.
Can I, with the Commission's permission, request that be minuted, be taken forward, and that it be put in front of the relevant cabinet member? Because I think actually it's a very valid point that if we have got a very substantial park and there are no cycle racks and cycle safe places for cycles, I think that's something worth looking at and taking forward. So thank you. Are you okay with the other responses? Oh, sorry, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, just to come in on that, Chair. I mean, obviously, I think as a cabinet, we'll be very happy to consider any suggestions that the Commission would like to put forward. To me, I suppose, if it's about building or building up our cycle bank provision, or cycle storage provision in these circumstances, where's the right place for it? We don't necessarily want to recreate that at Goffs Park because we're trying to recreate what the commuters were doing, because I don't think the commuters were picking that as an optimum place to go, regardless of how they were travelling there. They were doing it because they were getting free parking. And so it might be, for example, the Orchard Street would be, or High Street would be the better place for such a facility. But we'll look into that because we do take it seriously.
Okay, thank you. I have one more Councillor Ashraf to speak.
Thank you. First of all, good to see Council responding to the feedback positively. I just have a couple of observations. Under 1.3, we are saying our volume over value pricing model, it has worked really well for Kingsgate, and we want to replicate that to our Orchard Street car park as well. Then why we are going to change that model to at Kingsgate? Don't you think that will just put off the users? I mean, if it is so successful that we want to replicate that, we should continue with that at Kingsgate as well. And also for Orchard Street, we are offering quarterly, half-yearly and annual passes to residential permits, and also the town centre workers. But the pricing, we are not really giving any incentive to anyone who wants annual pass. Should we not give them some incentive, some discount? If someone is going for quarterly, instead of quarterly or half yearly, if someone goes for annual pass, they should be incentivized. Thank you.
So on the volume over value, since we introduced the £2.50 tariff, we've been monitoring how long people stay in the car park, and over the last year, it's shifted quite significantly. And a couple of things have led to that. The closure of the college car park across the street has led to long stay parking from people that were parking up at the college, and changes in how the town hall car park operate as well. And what that's resulted in is about 50% of the users of Kingsgate are staying long stay, so they're staying all day. What's also then happening is that town centre customers, people that are coming to visit the town centre, are driving in Kingsgate and out and then over to our commercial competitors. So we're losing custom because the car park is so full, and 50% of the people that are using it are blocking those spaces all day. Kingsgate's strategic value is as a short stay site for the town centres to support the local economy, to support shopping. So the shift of having two car parks with two very different identities enables us to provide what customers need, but making sure that each site is maximising its strategic value. So on passes, the the discounts that were previously offered, the discounts were extraordinary. So actually, our intention and our offer and the request that we had, particularly from businesses, was we want a shorter commitment. There is still a substantial discount for parking. Far more than neighbouring authorities are offering, but that doesn't prevent the amount of administration that is involved in managing that permit scheme. So what people have asked for when we engage with businesses, well, we want the ability to have a short-term permit, because actually we only work for 6 months at this place before we move on. So people wanted the ability to have less of a commitment. Cost wasn't a factor that people shared when they were expressing through then the Town Centre Business Improvement District what they'd like to see from us.
Okay. Are there any others? Councillor Calm.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the officers and everyone involved in this, and thank you for the consultation, very detailed. Just a couple of things. Questions on commuters who are using the Crawley Town Station. The signage, are there any new signage going up to tell them that there's parking available and the costs there? And secondly, for K2, it's concerning to hear, obviously, people parking dangerously and blocking the roads and stuff. Has K2, as an operator and a council, thought of ANPR or signing someone going into the K2 facility and putting their registration details in so that they don't get a penalty notice? And is there a penalty notice option for people who particularly badly park there, so that obviously it deters them with massive signs telling them not to do so?
So signage, and one of the reasons we disjointed the process for Orchard Street and Goffs Park is so that we can do that mass kind of behaviour change and encouragement for people to move down to the long stay secure parking, and that would be in place for a number of months before we implement any changes at Goffs Park. On ANPR, it's really difficult. We are quite restricted as a local authority about how we can use ANPR. So unlike private enforcement companies, we are not allowed to enforce via ANPR. And so we would have to renegotiate the contract with Everyone Active to make them responsible for that car park. And for obvious reasons, I'm sure Everyone Active are not going to sign up to that in a hurry. It's a really difficult site. And then there was a comment, I can't remember which councillor made it, around the complexity around who's exempt and who isn't is really difficult. So the ANPR is not possible. What we are still looking at is that we know we have a statutory duty to control the parking at K2. It is dangerous. People are parking out of bay, they're parking on roundabouts, in lay-bys, in bus stops. We need to work with the operator to understand how we can introduce those parking controls. And just for a kind of a sense of proportion, it's estimated it will cost the council £75,000 a year to resource that. It will need patrols 4 times a day, and that's an extensive amount of resource for one site. You're almost at that point talking about one dedicated officer for K2, and then all of the costs that sit in the background of just issuing a notice. There's a huge amount of process that sits in the background of that. So what we need to work with Everyone Active on is how do we introduce those parking controls to end out of bay dangerous parking in a way that is financially sustainable for us.
Just a supplementary on that, with regards to dangerous parking, surely the operator or reception could take the registration number, then call the council, and only then we could man that sort of penalty rather than have someone on a payroll for the whole time possibly.
No, it has to be witnessed by an authorised officer. So it has to be observed in person. The Deregulation Act in 2010 or 2015 that has made it exceptionally difficult for local authorities to enforce. We have a really set set of standards and expectations. So that includes an observation period. For example, we have to look at that vehicle for 5 to 10 minutes before we can issue a penalty charge notice. If we could issue retrospectively, it would make our lives a lot easier.
So I think the point was missed there. What basically happened in some boroughs in London, they have people on council officers on mopeds, and if someone does make a complaint, they turn up and then they follow the process of giving them 5 minutes, and then if the car's still in a dangerous place, they take a photograph and find them at that point, rather than doing constant sort of reviews of the place.
I think the really simple answer for that, Councillor, is we just don't have the resources or the capability to provide a service like some London boroughs are able to. I come from a London borough prior to my appointment at Crawley. They're much larger teams. We have one of the most complex enforcement areas for parking of anywhere in West Sussex. We have more controlled parking zones than anyone else. We are more densely populated than anyone else. It's a very resource intensive role, and we just don't have the resources available to respond like that.
Okay, if Councillor Crowe, if we can go back to your proposed amendment, do you have the wording and whereabouts it was to go into the report?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. What I'd like to propose is seek the Commission's support to add the words "and implications" after the words "to the implementation." It's page 67, F, recommendation F. So the final line of that would read, to give further consideration to the implementation and implications of parking charges in the future. That's what I'd like to propose. And I would just say this would not tie the Cabinet's hands in any way, but it would just give a little bit of balance whilst looking at the potential for introducing charges. And also I just ask that the officers also do engage with the local members, myself and Councillor Hellier, as and when any changes are proposed. So is that clear, Chairman?
I think so, yes. Councillor Jones?
Just to observe, Chair, it certainly wouldn't tie the the Cabinet's hands, because it's already part of the off-street parking strategy that's already been agreed, which does tie the Cabinet's hands. So all I can say is it's difficult to get excited about it, but you might be saying something that's already in the strategy, if you were to agree that, just to point that out.
Okay, on that basis, it doesn't actually change given what's said. I'm happy to second that, and then we can put it to, so I will second that amendment. And is that agreed that it goes in by the meeting? Is that agreed? Agreed? Okay. Do we want to vote on it, or are we just happy to say it's agreed? Okay, right, thank you. And thank you for the report. And I move that the Commission, before I move that the Commission, can I just say thank you to the officers as well? And again, thank you for an immensely detailed discussion. But I move to the Commission notes the report and request the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comments. And I ask the Vice Chair to second it, please. With Councillor Crowe's amendment.
I second that.
Okay, thank you. And then, again, thank you to the officers and for the pre-meet discussion as well. But you're not off the hook yet. So we'll move on to the extension, the next item, the extension of the PSPO, Keep Your Dog on a Lead in Tilgate Park, report from. And we've had a last-minute change just to advise members of the Commission. Councillor Jones will be speaking on this, as opposed to the Cabinet Member for Public Protection and for Georgina and Dan. So there's also the consultation results have been published in the supplementary agenda. So, Councillor Jones, could you introduce the report before we then pass over to the officers?
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, as you say, I am in the sad position of having to fill in for another Cabinet Member, this time Councillor Yasmin Khan, who's unfortunately not able to join us tonight to present this for medical reasons. I hope that Commission members will join me in wishing Councillor Khan a speedy and full recovery in the near future.
Absolutely.
Chair, the proposals in the report the Commission is considering tonight are to extend the existing public space protection order for Tilgate Park for dogs to be kept on leads in specified areas for a further 3 years, which is the maximum period permitted. This will be voted on by Cabinet with a final vote at full council. The current restrictions which are set out in the report are retained, including the geographical areas. The level of fines for the fixed penalty notices will also remain at £100 for now. Renewing it on this timeline allows for continuous protection at the relevant parts of the park. I need to stress that this PSPO has been successful, and it has certainly been used by the council over its lifetime. Since it was introduced, I'm informed that the number of injuries and deaths of animals reported has decreased to 0 in the park. Also, I've had many anecdotal approaches from park users saying how it's improved their experience when visiting. As I said, the PSPO has been used. In the past 3 years, officers informed me that it has been used 910 times. This involves the community protection team officers giving verbal instructions, with the vast majority of members of the public complying with that request, with only 3 fixed penalty notices subsequently needing to be issued. I think this all emphasises the effectiveness of the order and that it works, but it, of course, needs a form of legal recourse if people don't comply. The order is proportionate for what it's trying to achieve. There is a large area of the rest of the park that can still be used by dog owners without requiring a lead. There are other parks not covered by these controls if this is an insurmountable problem for them. And also, if it is not as if the council is entirely stopping any dog owners from entering the controlled parts of Tilgate Park. All they need to do is put their dog back on its lead, which we think is reasonable under the circumstances. Last time that the Commission looked at this, it recommended that consideration be given to a hound ground for owners to let their dogs run free. Such an area was indeed implemented, and although it moved once, it remains in place today. I would point to the general level of support for the PSPO that was given within the consultation period this time, Chair. Of those responding, a majority of those who responded, 59%, were in favour of extending it. The news report on the BBC News website indicated that even many dog walkers at the park were generally supportive, which I think in itself speaks volumes. And this was borne out in the consultation as well. Even more satisfying was that the large proportion of our respondents to the consultation, I believe it was 95% of those respondents, confirmed that they were Crawley residents. So I believe that it reached the right people, certainly in terms of response. Thank you, Chair, and I welcome any questions. And if I can't answer them, I'm sure there will be others present who can assist.
Okay, before I open to the floor, were there any other comments or additions from the officers? Okay, are there any comments or questions from the floor? Councillor Ramsey, then Councillor Crowe, then Councillor Rahn.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions, and they're kind of the same theme, so I'll just kind of ask them at once. Why did the consultation start so late that the results were only made available a few days ago? Because obviously, you know, Councillor Jones mentions that the consultation supports the order, but did you have did you have a preview of those results ahead of time? Like, because I don't see how we can say that a public consultation was taken into account when the report was published to us 10 days ago, but the report now post-consultation is completely unchanged. It seems like, you know, an assumption was made that a consultation was going to have a certain result, and then, you know, luckily on this occasion it did. But then that also raises another question, that are we not worried that people are kind of self-selecting in response to this survey? Because, you know, the 2022 opposition wasn't taken into account, and then they even mentioned that as a reason for opposing it this time. And I guess I worry that people maybe have looked at that and the previous incident that we discussed earlier and thought, oh, well, yeah, my opposition's not being taken into account. Why would I waste the time on this survey? And I was just wondering, is there any kind of like accounting for that, or is there any way we've kind of made this survey to try and ensure that that effect isn't too prominent? And then finally, this isn't really a question, it's more just me being pedantic, but in item 8.3, there's a typo. It says keep you dog in one of the background papers, and I think it means keep your dog. So maybe just a note for the paper. But yeah, that's it.
So I can answer a few of those questions, Chair. I'll ask the officers to look at the typos, Councillor Ramsey. Why so late? I wouldn't accept that this is late. We've done it all within the timescale. There will be a continuous PSPO at Tilgate Park. I think the consultation period ran for a reasonable amount of time, and certainly in local government standards. But let's say that the consultation had come back and everyone was massively hostile. We can withdraw a report any time up to the point where the decision is due to be made if we felt that that was the right thing to do. We don't in this particular situation. The previous consultation that happened 3 years ago has been raised. All I would say is that at the time there was quite a significant mismatch between the support for this PSPO between dog owners and park users. Park users were, of those who responded, were extremely supportive of the PSPO, or the large majority of them were supported. It was quite hefty, as I recall. Clearly, it wasn't quite so much the other way for the dog owners, but the point back then was that it is undoubtedly the case that the vast majority of our park users who describe themselves as park users weren't going with dogs, and so although numerically there might have been a number of submissions, we also had to take into account that some people were more motivated to register their opposition at the time. And I think always when you introduce something for the first time, people are always more resistant to it, but I think what we've seen this time is quite clearly people have adapted and have accepted that this is actually been of some benefit to the park. And I say this as someone who was mildly sceptical at times myself, but I can say that I think that in its totality this PSPO has worked and it deserves to be extended.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Ramsey?
Yeah, just a quick one. I mean, yeah, I accept all those responses. It was more in my initial point about why did it take so long. I wasn't implying that we'd kind of breached any kind of statutory deadline or anything like that. I was more thinking just it would be good as a commission if we had more than a weekend to scrutinise it as well. So like if there is capacity to do it earlier, like I don't understand why it wouldn't have been started 2 weeks earlier. Like is it because you want the most fresh public consultation results for this meeting, so you leave it as late as possible, or is it just or is that just how it works? Because essentially it just didn't seem kind of the best practice to be reviewing it over the weekend when the rest of the agenda was published 10 days before.
I think if I just on a technical point, Councillor, it's really important to remember that the consultation is not what Cabinet will be looking at, or not what full council should be looking at when they make a decision on the PSPO. It's the legal test. So is the behaviour persistent, unreasonable and detrimental to the quality of lives of others? And the data in the report, and the reason that the report hasn't changed is because the legal basis for officer recommendations on it has not changed. The officer recommendations are that the legal test for this order has been met. We have 2.5 years worth of data to say that the order has been proportionate, necessary. So the consultation is for full council to consider in terms of, and OSE and Cabinet to consider in terms of public perception of the order, but members' decision whether to make the order or not is not informed entirely by public consultation. It's whether it is the legally responsible thing to do.
Okay, Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've got quite a few comments, and I am somewhat steeped in the history. I praised the consultation on the previous agenda item because that had a very large response. But what's noticeable for the consultation on this agenda item is how much less of a response there is this time compared to what it was last time. And unfortunately, there is quite a lot of cynicism out there about council consultations, in part quite a lot related to the previous consultation when the PSPO first came in. Now, there's a lot of different things going on here. They do need to be decoupled somewhat. Firstly, I really welcome the fact that there haven't been any reported attacks either on people or wildfowl or indeed wildlife within the park since this came in. And indeed, my own adult daughter was attacked by a dog that came out of the lake some years ago and was bitten twice by that dog, and of course that dog was not on a lead. I think you would have found that there would have been even greater support for this PSPO if we had decoupled the golf course from the area of the rest of the park, where it includes the area around the lake and the lawns. I very strongly support the continuation of the PSPO for that area where it is appropriate and it is proportionate, and that very much fits in with the response from the Kennel Club that is made in the consultation. But where I don't think it is proportionate, I continue to think not, is the golf course. Now, again, on the previous agenda item, we talked about sustainability. Now, we have a very good representation here from, it's Councillor Jaggard, and she's sat over there in the audience, Maidenbower ward member, and she's absolutely spot on all these points that she raises on page 6 in the consultation. And of course, she's representing her residents in the same way that I know that my residents in Furness Green, many of whom border the golf course, live there because they have the facilities to be able to go and walk their dogs on the golf course, and they go straight from home by walking. But we, in order to let their dogs off a lead now, some of them may well have to drive to another location, take their dog in their car to be able to let their dog have a good run, and it's not popular locally. Had you separated the golf course from the lake, we would have found very different results. Like, we would have found even greater support for the lake and the park, the area around it, the lawns, but we would not, I'm convinced we would not have found support for the golf course where there isn't a problem. Now, in the consultation, we have a lot of statistics, and I welcome the number of warnings that have been given, but again, I would have liked to have seen those separated, and I don't know if the officers do have any information as to what percentage of those warnings were given in the golf course part of the PSPO area, and the rest were around the lake. I would imagine the vast majority of them will have been around the lake, which of course is much easier to patrol. And if we had a smaller area that didn't include the golf course, we would be able to have a greater resource to effectively police that area where it is needed. I still see no sensible reason why it needs to be included amongst the entire area of the golf course. And I know that I've been contacted by local residents on this who feel no need and feel that it is overkill for that particular area. So, I do strongly support it around the lake, but the previous full council, the Conservative group did move an amendment to remove the golf course from the area that was covered, and that was voted down by the Labour group. I don't know what will happen this time, but I do hope that Cabinet can change this order going forward as to what goes to full council. I do hope that Cabinet would give some consideration at their meeting on Wednesday to removing the golf course from this PSPO area, because I think they would find it would have even more support if they did that. Thank you.
do we have a response on those issues around the golf course? I'll let you tee off, Councillor Jones.
I think that's a fantastic metaphor there, Chair. Just before I address the golf course, can I just say on the consultation, it seems that the council can't win either way with Councillor Crowe on this, because we can only offer the opportunity for people to respond. And clearly people when we did the parking consultation demonstrated they could make representations when they want to. And I suspect that one of the reasons that the number of consultations we got on this are less is it reflects the relative lack of strength of opinion on extending the PSPO, because people have adapted and they accept that it probably more or less works, and if other people who wanted to make different arrangements have made different arrangements. About removing the golf course, I'm not yet personally persuaded of the case for removing the golf course from the footprint of the PSPO, but it is up to the Cabinet to decide the final borders, and if the Commission wish to make comments on this, that's entirely within your prerogative, Chair. Any agreed statement, I'm sure Democratic Services will tell you, will get passed on. One reason why I don't think it's a good idea, however, is that I do think there has been in the past, and there will continue to be, a danger to the dogs themselves and their owners from wandering around a golf course with being hit by golf balls. And that's not necessarily something I think that the council should be encouraging. If Councillor Crowe wants to come along to Cabinet and make his case to Cabinet when he makes a decision, as well as anything the Commission might have to say on this, then we'll certainly listen.
Okay. We have got 30 minutes before the guillotine we'll need to consider. So there was mentioned in there by Councillor Crowe as to whether there was distinction in the data of the people that have been spoken to between the golf course and the lake. I don't know if there's any response to that we might be able to, or if not, then whether that might be data we choose to capture in the future.
What I would say is that the vast majority is around the lake, because that's where the issues are most pronounced. And when the patrols are being undertaken, the majority of those that haven't got their dogs on the lead are around the lake, and I think we're very aware of the fact that the lake is one of the main the main issues. The reason for the golf course inclusion, particularly the wooded area, was around the fawn and the deer, which were also wildlife that were being killed in the park, and people's lack of ability to see dogs darting out. And being able to prepare themselves for that. But again, it will be a matter for Cabinet. In terms of breaking down, I don't think I can provide that data per intervention, but what I would say is the vast majority.
Okay, thank you. Is that okay? We right to move on? Councillor Rana, and then we've got Councillor Lunnon.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Chair. I fully support this proposal because I think that's a really, really good idea. I mean, dogs, especially in parks, dogs should be kept on leads out all the time. At the end of the day, they're wild animals. And before we had the PSPO, I used to see dogs chasing children and adults, and children hiding behind the trees, screaming. So that's really good. And now that the weather is warm, the dogs tend to go into the water, because yesterday I was at Worth Park and the dogs just came from suddenly and jumped into a lake. And in the lake, there are lots and lots of, new ducklings and everything. So, thank God the owners called the dog and it came straight out. So this is something we should continue for a very, very long time. And I think another thing, to tell you the truth, I don't think, I know lots of people got dogs and dog lovers, and even I had dogs. Years and years ago, my parents used to keep dogs in their shops. And so, even with our proposals, having consulting people, it should be done anyway, because they're wild animals at the end of the day. And I know someone got bitten at work, she was telling me recently, by a dog, and her hand swelled up so much. So it needs to be done urgently. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lunnon.
Thank you. I, like Councillor Jones, am sort of relatively glad that the consultation saw a bit more of a positive response this time than maybe what we got a few years ago, and I'm glad I will be supporting it. And also, like, I think it's important to note that some people might perceive the council to be anti-dog in some way because of this procedure, but you know, if you look at what we've invested in at Tilgate Park, we've improved facilities for dogs up at the park there. So I really don't want people to think that we're not anti-dog. It's just that, especially around the lake at Tilgate Park, it is a very busy, especially during peak periods, a very busy environment that really does need to be controlled in some way to enable the maximum enjoyment for most people. The one question I have got on this is not specifically in the detail of the report. It's on how much officer time has been spent on policing this PSPO, and it looks like the number of findings and reports are sort of generally trending down as people become used to the rules being in place. And I was wondered, as a result of that, could we see some readjustment of officers' patrol priorities, especially in relation to the fact that some of our earlier issues with the tenants in Crawley homes being unhappy with antisocial behaviour, you know, if we can get some community warden time back dealing with antisocial behaviour in neighbourhoods rather than around the lake. I'm not saying that one's more important than the other. I'm just saying that this seems to be, compliance with this seems to be sort of happening better. So if we can get that officer time spent, you know, in other areas where maybe residents are less happy, is that something that would be considered as well as part of the success of continuing this proposal?
Thank you, Councillor. On community protection team patrol time, predominantly those patrols are at the weekend. So the team will spend a substantial amount of time in Tilgate Park doing various things, not just the dog control, but it will get at least 2 patrols a week. But it's also informed by residents that report via the My Crawley platform. So if we start to see an increase in reports on particular days of the week, then we will respond to that. But there are at least 2 full days of patrol per week. Absolutely, the trend is going down. What I'd say is the substantial reduction that we saw this year directly correlated with the prosecution that we did. So it was a gentleman with 2 dogs, unpaid FPN, didn't turn up at court and was, you know, prosecuted to the fullest extent that the magistrates could on the day. What we saw immediately was a drop-off in our problematic individuals who were repeatedly being given those instructions, who have gone to other parks since. But yes, the less time that we can spend on patrols like this and invest into those areas that residents are asking us to go into, the better.
Councillor Hellier, and then I think we have one from the floor.
Thank you. It was just really on what you just said in relation to patrolling. I'm a runner and I do use quite extensively Tilgate Park, the surrounding area, and also the paths that cross the golf course. We're talking about sort of patrolling and the times that we do that, but there is also, and it's really a dual thing, it's not just the enforcement of the PSPO, but I cannot think of a time when I haven't gone there or I haven't smelt drugs actually in and around the area. So if we're actually looking at enforcement, we should be, you know, sort of really looking at, well, what are we enforcing and can we combine it so that we make it safe for people to use? Because I guess my concern is that you get a lot of young people in that area, so that it's not just the dogs.
Yeah, Councillor, you're exactly right, and that's the kind of thing where we're up there for extended periods of time. That's the thing that we're looking for. What I would say is I really encourage members and residents to use the My Crawley platform. When we kind of rejigged the community protection team, made it really clear it's an intelligence-driven service. So tell us where we need to be, and we will go. We have limited powers in terms of dealing with smoking of cannabis beyond telling people off, wearing body cameras, which normally helps, but we can certainly pass that information on to police.
Yeah, it's just if we could perhaps highlight, sort of advertise that more, that people do have that opportunity, I think that would help.
Councillor Jones.
Thanks, Chair. I think just on the point about the cannabis or the marijuana smoke or stench, Councillor Hillier, you probably need to raise this with Mrs. Bourne as much as us, but obviously we have a low opinion of people using such substances in the parks, and we will discourage it.
I certainly know in various meetings that we've had that the My Crawley data capture is absolutely crucial. I think as councillors it's something that we do need to push and promote to provide that data to help officers. Now, all councillors have had the opportunity to speak. We've got Councillor Jaggard here tonight, and would you like to speak on this? Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee, for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm here to speak as Ward Councillor for Maidenbough. I'm not a dog owner, and I never have been, but I really support the PSPO in the main lawn area, the Peace Gardens, the Tilgate Lake area. And it's on the report at 3.4, it says to maintain public safety, protect wildlife and support responsible dog ownership in Tilgate Park. Now, if you talk to anybody about the definition of Tilgate Park, it is those areas, the lawn, the Peace Gardens and around the lake, that they consider Tilgate Park. The forest is completely different. It's accessible from Furnace Green and from Maidenbough across the railway bridge, and it's a woodland area. There's very few people there, and in fact, had there been an issue in that area, it would have been data, there would have been data collected, but I can only assume that there has been no issues up in that area because there's no data for that area. Now, looking at the report, it says that nearly 60% did support the PSPO, but that means 40% people didn't support the PSPO. And those that didn't put their main reason is for the golf course area. Now, dogs running around off a lead in a woodland is very, very different to the grassy areas. And the Maidenbough residents, and in fact Furnace Green residents, if they can't, that is our nearest outside open space. It means that residents will have to drive. Now, part of our climate change sustainability policy tries to make people avoid driving. Now, if we're driving over to Pound Hill, to Worth Park, there are swans and ducks and things there. We've got to drive there. We've got to drive to Goffs Park, where there's mini golf and other children's activities. There is nowhere for dogs to roam that we can just take them across the railway line, let them walk up and down the paths. Sometimes they go into the bushes, sniff, do what dogs do in the undergrowth. It's good for them. It's good for their mental well-being. And I really do not see that it's proportionate to ban dogs from roaming in that large woodland area. Now, that woodland area historically has got many paths across it. I've looked at various interactive maps from West Sussex which shows footpaths, tracks and rights of way. They're all over there. They're right historic paths of ancient footpaths, and it just seems to me that we're putting restriction on a too great area, and I really hope that you can consider, as Councillor Crowe said, decoupling the formal gardens, which is what most people think of Tilgate Park as, and decoupling it from the woodland area, and maybe removing the Tilgate Golf Course woodland area from this PSPO. And I really appreciate it, and my residents would too. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know if there's any response from officers there from the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, thank you to Councillor Jaggard. I hear the arguments, and I think I'll have to take some advice on the officers on the potential risks to wildlife in particular, and I'm particularly thinking of the deer and the fawns and within the forest. Who, of course, as we know, deers are incredibly sensitive. But what I will promise tonight to Councillor Jackard is I will ensure that there is a discussion about this at Cabinet. But I am but one vote at Cabinet, so it has not been. It has not been discussed amongst us previously on this particular point. And as I say, although I hear the arguments, I mean, if we talk about Maidenbow, we talk about Furnace Green. I mean, even locally, Tilgate Park isn't the only option for dogs being walked. What I want to do is I want to dispel the misconception that if dog walkers don't have there's nowhere else for their poor canines to roam. That's not strictly true. But obviously we don't want to restrict anything for the sake of it. There's got to be a good and a proportionate reason. And I think we'll take some further advice on this from officers, Chair, and I think that's the best I can offer tonight.
Okay, thank you. I think we really do need to move on, given the agenda. So we've had the opportunity to speak, and thank you for the responses that we've had. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests the views expressed during the debate, and we've had that acknowledged by the Council Leader. They're fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, and I ask the Vice Chair to second, please. Is that agreed?
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay. Is the recommendations of the report agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you. And thank you very much to the officers again for a very, very enlightening discussion that we had on the data capture. So we move on to item 9, forthcoming decision list. This is featured on the agenda. Okay, so it's featured on the agenda, also on the Council's website. I'd ask Heather to list those that have been referred, but of course we have the intervention of an additional meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. As you are aware, there is now scheduled an additional OSC meeting on Monday the 21st of July. When I was preparing this agenda, I was going to give you a very long list of those agenda items that were scheduled for September. But instead, I'm going to do that at the July meeting instead. As you're aware, given the meeting on the 21st of July, the primary focus of that meeting that was set up is to cover the LGA Corporate Peer Challenge feedback recommendations and the CBC action plan. So that was what the 21st of July meeting is scheduled for. However, there are also 2 Part B reports also heading to the Cabinet on the 22nd of July. So the Commission does have the opportunity to refer one or both of those reports should it wish. Those 2 reports are the disposal of council-owned property and commercial asset budget and options appraisal. If you wish either of these reports to be referred as well, please let me know, or if you wish the meeting on the 21st of July to solely focus on the peer review, which was the initial focus of the meeting, you can have that instead. Thank you.
Okay, so we have that in front of us. I mean, I do recall at the last meeting that the peer review was a matter that the Commission did want to discuss in depth. So the question is, do we want to bolt onto that these 2 Part B reports, the disposal of the council property and the commercial asset? So any thoughts on that from the floor? The second one is the commercial assets budget and options appraisal.
That's okay. I'm going to ask for both those to go on the agenda. The commercial assets could cover quite large assets that if it's hard strategy for how we're going to deal with them, then we need to give that some scrutiny, because otherwise decisions could be made in accordance with that strategy. And secondly, I think it's always good to see what we're getting rid of and putting some scrutiny on it. So, yeah, I'm going to ask for both.
Okay, that's a proposal from the floor. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay, right. Now we come to part, are we okay to move on now? Yep. Come to part B, exempt reports. This is the confidential section of the meeting. Therefore, under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act by virtue of the paragraph specified against the item. The recording and live stream will now finish, so I wish to thank anyone who has been watching. Thank you. And let's take a moment if we need to